Hi, I'm Ethan from Campus WheelWorks, and today we're going to learn how to unsqueak squeaky disc brakes. Disc brakes can squeak for a number of different reasons. Often though, it is worn pads on a worn rotor, and those two surfaces get polished to a state where there's no longer a lot of friction, and instead you get vibration, and that vibration comes to us in the form of a squeak. This can also happen from contaminated brake pads or getting lube, solvent, other things, road salt even on your rotors. So this time of year, that's a big problem for us here in Buffalo, as bikes are on the road with road salt and whatever grit and grime is on there, and there's pretty much a constant onslaught of material going onto your disc brakes. I recently had brand new brakes on my fat bike within a week of just riding down a quarter-mile of my road that's salted to get to the trail. I contaminated my pads and they started howling. So that made me think, what a better time to do a video on de-squeaking disc brakes. The tools we'll be using today are a clean rag, butane torch, sandpaper, usually a fine grit of sandpaper. We also have some that we've glued onto a piece of wood, which is kind of a little pro tip. Makes it a little easier to fine tune and scuff your brake pads, whether they're disc brake pads or rubber brake pads. Juicy Lube's disc brake cleaner, isopropyl alcohol, 2.5, 3 millimeter Y wrench, 4, 5, 6 millimeter Y wrench. You only really need this if you have Allen through axles, which we do. Needle nose pliers, and this is our micrometer, and of course, tasty beverage. First thing we're going to do is remove our wheel. So for different wheels, I have done a breakdown of a lot of different wheels in my flat fix video if you're not sure how to remove your wheel. This is a Shimano clutch, so we turn off the clutch on the derailleur, shift it into the highest gear, grab your Allen wrench, loosen your through axle, pull that out, set it aside. And while pulling back on the derailleur, we just drop the wheel out. Set that aside for now. Then we're going to remove our brake pads. With the needle nose pliers, remove your little safety clip. Set that aside. Don't lose it. Very easy to lose. Then we have an Allen wrench on this bolt, which is fixing our pads in place. On this guy, that's a 3. On my SRAM brakes, it's a 2, but it's usually a small Allen. On some bikes, it's just a clip that you put through and bend the end on. So that's that little bolt. Pull that out, set it aside, don't lose it. Then we just want to push our pads out. These guys come right out the top. So your disc brake pads are going to have a pad on either side and a spring. So sometimes they are inside or left and right specific. These ones are not, so pay attention to that for your brakes if they are. Next, we're going to sand our brake pads. We basically want to get rid of this real shiny, smooth surface and make it a little rough. That will help the brake have more friction and vibrate less against the rotor. So I'm just going a little circular pattern. So this brake pad has some metal in it along with some resin, so it's going to have this kind of sheen to it once you sand it. If you can see that different from the previous one, hopefully you can see that we've gotten rid of the all shiny part. Just break it down like this. Looking good. Next, we're going to play with fire, the fun part. We're going to torch these pads to try to burn off any contaminants that may have found their way into the pads. It is a porous material and it will absorb different things, like I mentioned before, solvents, lubricants, junk off the road, junk off the trail. So a little torch like this is pretty handy. You can get them at head shops, hardware stores, hobby shops for, you know, whatever you need to do. This one always takes a couple to fire. There we go. Got our flame. And we just kind of keep moving it around. I do this on a non-flammable surface like this floor. Just heat them up. You'll usually see a little bit of moisture kind of evaporate off at least the metal part of the pad. It might start to look a little different, but you don't got to go too crazy. You don't want to melt the things. But just heat them up real good. And we're just going to leave them there and let them cool. If your brake pads are really gunked up and extra dirty, you can either soak them down with isopropyl alcohol, or we like to use Juicy Lube's brake juice, disc brake cleaner. This stuff, shake it up, blast them. They say you can just let it evaporate and it won't leave any film, but I find it's a little more fun to apply some fire to the situation. Again, do this in a place that is safe to have open flame. And just apply the torch, a little bit of heat, burn off any contaminants and what's left of the brake cleaner, because that's more fun. Next, we're going to torch our rotor. This usually has the biggest effect because you'll see the moisture actually evaporate off of it with the heat applied from the torch. Ooh, yeah, hopefully you can see that. And usually it'll be one line of evaporation with just the heat being applied. And then as you go back around, you'll see it change again. Some people remove the rotor from the wheel. I don't. I've never found it to heat up the spokes too much. I suppose you could try to get both sides, but the rotor's pretty thin and will heat up all the way around, and this is way quicker. If your rotor was really dirty, this one is not, it's even on a brand new bike, but if your rotor was really dirty, you can take some isopropyl alcohol, spray it on a rag, clean the rotor, and then apply the torch. I wouldn't do it while holding it, but just as an example. And just burn off all of that isopropyl alcohol. Another good thing to check is rotor thickness. Your rotor thickness will tell you how worn your rotors are and if they need to be replaced. A very worn rotor is very hard to get to not squeak. It also will force your pistons too far out of your disc brake calipers and can cause damage or cause your brakes to not work properly. Most new rotors come at 1.8 millimeters and they should be replaced when they get down to 1.5. There are some variants to that for 140 millimeter rotors, so check with your manufacturer's specs to be sure. But we usually measure that with a micrometer. Micrometers go down to a very small measurement and give you a very precise measurement, so you can always have your local bike shop take care of that for you. To measure your rotor, we use a micrometer. Not everybody has one of these, but I figured I'd show you this since we do. Basically, open that puppy up, place it on the rotor. I picked a rotor that I know is fairly worn. This is my wife's bike. It's in the shop getting its winter overhaul. And we are down to 1.49. So this rotor has to go. Her brakes were not squeaking in this instance, but this rotor is very worn and her lever has a ton of pull to it, so that is one of the myriad of options that are causing her brake issues. So this rotor will be getting replaced. You also can see on here how polished and worn this rotor is, so it's pretty easy to imagine that brakes are going to wear to that and make it fairly easy and quick for them to start howling and squeaking. Then we just need to put everything back together. So you take your little spring, stick it between your brake pads. Sometimes they require a little bit of encouragement to get around the edge of the brake pad. This did not. Slide it into your caliper. Take your little brake pad bolt, slide it in there, tighten it down. Righty-tighty. Put on your little circlip if you haven't lost it. I have ran brakes without these, but it's probably smartest to have it in there. That basically is a fail-safe for if this loosened up, it won't allow it to come out all the way, so your brake pads won't fall out of your bike, rendering you unable to stop. So, good thing to have. Then we take our wheel, put it back in the frame. We're going to pull back on the derailleur a little bit, set the chain on the highest gear or close to it. Just pull it right up in there. While pulling up, slide in your through axle. Take your Allen wrench, this is a 6mm, and tighten that down. There we go. Righty-tighty, nice and tidy. I'd probably go ahead and shift it out of the biggest gear just because it's going to be really hard to start riding your bike. Make sure your brake spins and doesn't rub. Sometimes it's hard to hear it with the free hub noise, so you can spin it backwards. No rub. Good. Turn your clutch back on with your little lever on your derailleur. Now let's just make sure it doesn't squeak. Ah, peace and quiet. No more. We all have that friend in our riding group, Alan, whose brakes howl, and every time you're trying to be out in the woods or on a nice group ride and enjoying nature, instead all you hear is their howling brakes. So share this video with them. Maybe it'll be helpful. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment. Maybe you have a different way of solving this problem. I'm all ears. We're always learning. And on that, hopefully more videos will be coming to you from Campus TV. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time.